Welcome back, and apologies if my link into the last ad break that teased bikes that used to race in F1 left you a bit confused. I am of course not referring to the inferior Formula One car racing, but rather the very interesting story of the F1 Championship for bikes that can count amongst its champions such illustrious names as Mike Hailwood, Phil Reed, Graham Crosby, Ron Haslam, Joey Dunlop and Carl Fogarty, with only one non-native English speaker in the form of Italian Virginio Ferrari, who won on a Yamaha-powered bimotor. Actually, the overall championship was called Formula TT, and within it, 3 classes, F1, 2 and 3 were raced. F1 was the premier class for 4-stroke bikes of 600 to 1000cc, though it would be later restricted to 750s, or you could ride a 2-stroke between 350 and 500cc's. It all came about because of safety concerns in the Grand Prix community. Safety issues in MotoGP's 3 classes these days tend to be concentrated around the fact that deaths occur as a result of the extremely close racing. Riders die when they're hit by another rider because the grids are so competitive. In days gone by, deaths more often than not were due to unsafe circuits where riders came to a very sudden stop because there wasn't enough runoff area. It seems unthinkable now, but as recently as the 1970s, much of the Grand Prix calendar was held on public roads, and hitting a lamppost or wall or even a house was a very real possibility. Between 1949 and 1976, the British Grand Prix was held at the Isle of Man, and it was the premier Grand Prix of the season. It seems impossible to imagine the likes of Marquez and Rossi battling it out on the island, but that's exactly what was happening back when I was a lad. And I'm not that old, so don't pretend this was like hundreds of years ago or something. Obviously it was dangerous, and there had been plenty of disgruntlement from the riders over the years, but they really didn't have the influence that they do now, so nothing much changed. Eventually, however, the Rossi of the day, Giacomo Agostini, said he would never race there again after his close friend Gilberto Parlotti was killed in 1972. More riders gradually joined Agostini's boycott, and so in 1976 the British GP was moved to Silverstone. That obviously left the TT organisers on the Isle of Man in something of a quandary, so they got involved with starting a new World Championship to be known as Formula TT. The first title in 1977 went to Phil Reed, while the final one was won by Carl Fogarty in 1990. The championship was then brought to a halt because riders and teams were deserting it in favour of an upstart rival series that had begun in 1988 and was rapidly becoming more of a commercial success. It was called the Superbike World Championship. This little history lesson that I hope you found at least a bit interesting is basically setting the scene so I can show you 2 amazing Suzuki race bikes that I came across in one of my recent museum visits here in Germany. This beast of a bike is the Suzuki RGV500 that New Zealander Graham Crosby rode to the F1 title in 1980, winning, by the way, at the Isle of Man along the way with a 109.65 mph lap. This 500cc 2-stroke had 4 cylinders arranged in a square format and pushed out 124 horsepower in a package that weighed only 144 kilos. That's a combination that could propel the bike up past 300 kilometers an hour. Crosby also took the F1 title in the following season, but in 1981 he was riding a very different kind of bike from the same manufacturer, namely this GS1000R that also went by the codename XR69. The 997.5cc inline 4-cylinder engine was good for 132 horsepower, weighed in at 175 kilograms, and just like the RG, it could get Crosby up past the 300 km/h mark given the right conditions. The bike was tuned by Yoshimura and scored some major extra glory on top of the F1 success that year by winning at the Suzuka 8 Hours when Crosby teamed up with American Superbike legend Wes Cooley. 2 hugely successful race bikes that are very much part of the backstory to Suzuki being MotoGP world champions 50 years later with Juan Mir and the GSX RR. And that is where we'll have to leave it for this week because we've run out of time. But we'll be back again next week with more time and more bikes. See you then.